Now from Washington, Republican Senator from Oklahoma, Senator Tom Coburn. He's the author of the new book, The Debt Bomb, A Bold Plan to Stop Washington from Bankrupting America.
So, Tom, earlier in the show, we had Steve Ratner on. He always comes armed with charts. And one chart he showed this morning, particularly disturbing as we hear about Europe's collapse. The chart is about the budget deficit as a percentage of the GDP, and it shows that actually the United States percentage is higher than Germany's, Italy's, and Portugal's, and right next to Spain's, and not so far from Greece. We are doing worse than a lot of these European countries that are about to fall off a cliff.
I agree. The question people ought to be asking is why are we not doing something about it? And that's the frustrating thing with Washington right now is the very real problems that are in front of us. None of the legislation that's in front of Congress, especially the Senate, is addressing any of those issues.
Why not?
It's all about election, and nobody wants to take those hard votes. It's the typical delay is I'll make the hard votes after I got the next election passed, and then once we're past the next election, the rationalization comes back, I don't want to take those hard votes. I'll make it the next time I get past the next election. We're short-term thinkers running crisis from crisis, and what it displays, and our biggest problem in our country, is leadership.
So what's the impact of that, and at what point are Washington leaders forced to actually lead on the debt?
Well, eventually, you know, we just saw a down rating, right, by Fitch on Japan, 2 point down to A+. We're going to get another downgrade. You know, the Treasury Secretary will deny that, but he can't say anything but that. But it's going to come, and we deserve it. We have not done what we need to do to put our country in the position to both secure the future. You know, just one little small number. If we were paying historical interest rates right now on our debt, we would be spending $700 billion a year on interest. That's more than we spend on defense. That's near what we spend on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. So the point is we're at great risk for a rising interest, and that will happen when people no longer have the confidence that we're going to fix our problem. And that's why leadership is so important. Bringing our country together. You know, we have a disparate country with lots of points of view. What we lack is leadership to say, here's the problem. Let's debate the solutions to the problem, but let's quit denying the problem. The problem is our government's out of control. It's twice the size it was 10 years ago. Our deficit last year was bigger than our budget 15 years ago. So it's not that we can't solve the problems, we lack the political will and the leadership to solve them.
And here we go again, Mike Barnacle.
Senator, a couple of things occurred to me listening to your initial comments here this morning. One is that the perennial conflict between campaigning and governing seems to be there's no conflict anymore. Campaigning now is an extension that lapses over into governing. And again, listening to your comments, you seem to be making a plea, a quiet plea perhaps, for term limits. You know,
I'm a big believer in them. I believe in them absolutely.
I mean, if we have a majority, or I don't know how many, in both the House and the Senate, who refuse to address the reality of the issues that confront us, the debt in particular, because they always say, well, we'll take the next vote after the next election, and there never seems to be a time when there's no next election.
Yeah, it's a mirage over the hill that I'm going to get there and fix it, and it just doesn't happen. Now, term limits will never happen because it requires a constitutional amendment, and as long as you have career politicians, it's not as much term limits as it is the lack of perspective outside of politics and outside of government in terms of the application of making critical judgments on issues. And what we have is a large number of members of Congress that have no real world experience. And so if we're eventually going to solve the problems because nobody's going to loan us the money to keep acting the way we're acting, but the pain associated with that is much too great. And why should we submit America to that kind of pain when we can have much less pain and solve our problems now?
No real world.
Nobody wants to take the hard votes because they're afraid they may not get reelected. And what I'm telling you is the point is the best thing that can happen is to take the hard votes and lose so the country's better off.
Willie, no real world experience. I mean,
none.
That's right. They don't live in the world.
No.
Senator Coburn, it's Willie. I want to ask you about the urgency that should be created about this problem. And I think part of the problem is people don't see the consequences, or they maybe don't understand the consequences of rising debt. It sounds like a macro problem, and we assume our lives are still chugging along. There's still milk on the shelves and money in the ATMs, and this is some faraway problem. Can you explain to people who are watching today how debt impacts their daily lives, and if it doesn't yet, how it may down the road?
Well, yeah, I certainly can, and thanks for asking that question. If you're a college student today, 1 in 2 can't find a full-time job. That's going to become 3 out of 4. If you have a 401k or an IRA, and you think you have retirement set, with the debasement of our currency and the high interest rates and the resultant inflation that will come with that, what you will see is decreased purchasing power, which is the typical political cowardly way of raising taxes on everybody, is you inflate your way out of the debt. You can't borrow your way out of debt, so the non-courageous thing is to allow inflation to take over so that your purchasing power actually declines. And so the impact personally on individuals, especially in their 40s and 50s, is going to be devastating. Finally, the very programs that we have out there in terms of a safety net to really help those people who can't help themselves, that's going to be devastated as well. So from both sides of the aisle, whether you're far right or far left, the ultimate answer of doing nothing is terrible for America, and doing something and addressing this issue now is very beneficial for America, even though it's painful and we all will have to sacrifice a little bit.
Senator Tom Coburn, author of The Debt Bomb.
It's a great book, by the way.
Thank you very much.
A must read.
Good to be with you guys.
Good to see you again. Coming up next, best-selling author and journalist Bob Reitz takes us inside the Arctic oil rush. Plus, we'll get the birthday boy on the phone.
Boone Pickens.
It's Boone, we're calling him. Keep it right here on Morning Joe.